Okay, the Browns lose their third straight, this time to the New England Patriots, and this time the most thoroughly they've been beaten this year, losing 38-15 in a game where, all three facets of the game failed in numerous ways. A frustrating watch. I'm always curious when people say, I'd rather that my team just get beat than lose close games, because then it happens and everybody's absolutely miserable, which is what this week has been.
I think, okay, so Pete, keep going and then I'll jump in.
Well, so, and this is where you being so busy, like, works to your advantage, is because everybody's like, in some ways you get beat badly enough, you can sort of like process it much more quickly, as opposed to like living the missed opportunities over and over and over again. But it happens. So what is everybody wanting to do this week is blow up everything and fire people, whatever, to the point where we get into stuff that has nothing to do with anything. And this is some of the stuff that just drives me nuts. In three different people who are media people who have jobs have mentioned temperament, manner, and just like Kevin Stefanski's, just how he carries himself on a sideline, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything. And you would think of all people that would understand this, it would be Cleveland, who chased out Bill Belichick, who is like one of the least interesting, most like disheveled looking people on the sideline, who doesn't get worked up about anything and has a fistful of Super Bowl rings that you wouldn't sit here and like reduce yourself to, well, I wish Kevin Stefanski would show more emotion on the sideline. You don't want your head coach to be fake. You want him to be who he is, because that's who players are going to respond to. It's not play acting. You're not putting on a show for fans when you're losing. The bottom line is you want to not lose. You don't want to like get an extra show or some like weird demonstration that shows how much he cares when they're losing. Like, that stuff just doesn't matter to me. And there's been all kinds of this crap that I've been hearing this week that just doesn't matter to anything. You're never going to sit here and go, man, let's talk about hiring a head coach in any sport. How does he react when his team is losing? When his team's getting their ass kicked by 3 touchdowns? How does he really look then to rally the team that's not going to win that game? Like, that stuff it's irrelevant. And it just, like, I've suggested to people that these are the times where you sit there and go, I'm just not going to pay attention to this anymore, because it doesn't help anything. It just makes you dumber and get angrier at nothing.
Okay, so I will start with first. I was one of those people that actually, I got a time hop a year ago of a tweet that I put out, which is mind-boggling how similar this year is actually playing out to what we experienced last year, in that I always found defeat that happened like throughout the entire game a lot easier to process and handle than like the last minute losses. And I think really that's just the emotional reaction or investment of like feeling like there's hope at the last minute and then just getting it ripped away from you. So for me, I always kind of found the defeat of like a game where it didn't look like you had any chance of winning it to be easier to swallow in the end, because they just came out and completely looked terrible. I mean, from the first offensive play of the game, actually it was the second. And that kind of just permeated throughout the entire game. Now, I think a lot of us as fans were hoping that the Browns would bounce back and this would be a victory that we definitely could have won. We could have won that game. But, right, we also have to understand, like, we were up against Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches of all time. And you knew that he was going to have his team prepared and attack all of the Browns' weaknesses and take away our biggest strengths on offense. So, Pete, this was really the first experience that this team has had from an offensive perspective of not really being efficient and effective. And I will say, like, credit to Bill Belichick, the fact that he was able to take away the run. And I know that we did not run the ball as much as we would have liked to have seen. But part of that was the game planning of the New England Patriots. So, and Jacoby Brissett not being able to effectively pass the ball. Like, when you can't open up the offense a little bit, the run game is going to be stifled and stymied. But going back to what you were saying, we talked about this last week too. People want instant gratification, right? Absolutely. Like, we dropped 3 games in a row. And so people's direct response to all of this is they want to see people get fired. They want people to be held accountable. They are sick of hearing about Kevin Stefanski, how he says the same thing post press conference after a loss, that he has to go back and look at it. that he takes full blame for all of this. He is very calm. That's his personality. That is his demeanor. People want to see the opposite. They want to see angry, clipboard throwing, punching air. I don't know. Do they want to see grunting? They want to see him grunting, mad, angry at press conference. Would that make people feel better if he was grunting and snorting and yelling like ferociously? No. If he was doing that, people would be like, he needs to be way calmer. Yes. Like it doesn't matter what he does. Everything right now is wrong because they are losing.
Right. Whatever you're getting when you're losing, everybody wants the opposite. So
yes,
when you have a lunatic on the sideline who's losing his mind, like, I don't know, Dan Campbell in Detroit, who everybody loved because he's so emotional. He's really raw and everybody's like, oh, Hard Knocks, Lions going to be really good. And then they find out he's kind of a dumbass in games and he can't and he's really emotional. He's really active. And there's, that is part of what the players on the Lions like about him. But then when you're losing, you want somebody who's not acting like a lunatic because that's all they get. It's like the bottom line is what you really don't want is losing. And when people say they want accountability, what they really mean is they don't want to lose. Like,
yes, exactly.
So like, that's it. And that's one of those
winning fixes everything. That hasn't changed. Winning fixes everything.
Like, and that's one of those things. It's a buzzword that has lost all meaning. I don't know what that means anymore. When people go, I want accountability, because if I was to say to you, hey, and we'll get there, Grant Delpit played bad on Sunday.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you want the Browns to then bench him and put in D'Anthony Bell and then, really send a message to
I honestly think that people think like people are saying fire the coaches. Like at the end of the day, like almost the entire defense deserves to be benched. And then what? And then we're worse than we are right now, which is bad. So then you're going to actually see even worse product marched out on the field. Like, is that what we really want?
Right. So like, that's the thing. Like, and if you were to say, hey, we are collectively going to sign up for the Browns to send a message by saying Grant Delpit, this is not good enough. And that would obviously be some stuff we're not privy to. Is he not putting in the work, necessary behind the scenes on in the building, all that stuff. But if the Browns were to come out and said, this is what we're doing, we're benching these, insert 3 players and we're putting these other guys in, and those guys go out there and suck and they go, that's fine. They're going to suck or they're not going to play as well, but they're going to play the way we want them to play. And then the Browns go and lose by 28. Then the Browns are going to get criticized for not putting the best players on the field. Like that's one of those things where like, accountability doesn't really mean anything at that point. What you really want is just to win, which is fine, but just say that. I wish it could be as simple for some people. And I've tried this, is like either say, I don't know, or I really wish the Browns were playing better than this. I don't like losing. And it could be as simple as that, but it always transitions into it transitions to who can I blame and who do they fire to make these things happen. And they want, and this is true of certainly more than just the Browns or football or anything, but like they want easy answers that they're not going to get. It's not as easy as, well, if you do this one thing that suddenly is, unless the answer is play better, which is an unsatisfying answer.
Yeah. I mean, and Pete, I think too, like frustrations are just boiling over in general with this fan base overall, because, we know that this isn't the quarterback of the future. Like we just have to deal with Jacoby Brissett, which he's been serviceable in a couple of games, but
close to Halloween, Bree. It's getting close to Halloween.
Yeah, like he was a pumpkin on Sunday, and like part of that is frustrating to deal with, because also, can we just say for a minute, like people were also calling for Josh Dobbs to just enter the game. So, we've already entered that stage of like our backup quarterback. We are now calling for the third string quarterback because he isn't really our future starter. So like, to me, that's also wild. Like we kind of knew what we were dealing with in totality. And like, we should have expected that he's going to have some bad games, but the expectations of this fan base, I think, are probably maybe rightfully or wrongfully so, like they're a little bit unrealistic. And we're coming off of the other team in town, the Guardians, who just lost game 5 of the ALCS against the Yankees. If you watch both teams play, I think what you find frustrating as a Browns fan who also watches the Guardians is that the Guardians were a super young team full of a bunch of talent who were not supposed to achieve the level of winning that they did this year. Like, they were not supposed to make it into the division, let alone into the championship series. And that's frustrating, right? Because you have a team in town that is overachieving and beating expectations. And then you have your football team who is full of talent from everything that we think of from a roster standpoint, and they are underachieving expectations, regardless of who their quarterback is, right? Like, we felt like the defense brought all the same people back, should be even better than last year. And they were good last year. You have an offense that is put together for the most part, and your quarterback obviously is not who's going to be in the future, but you feel like the rest of the talent on that side of the ball should be enough to get you a good amount of wins. And that's frustrating, right? Because you start to then question, is it the coaching? Is it the talent? Is it the roster? Like, do they believe in one another? Do they believe in their coaching staff? Do they believe in this system? Do they believe in this offense? Like, how do you fix this, Pete? Because, like, I am very perplexed right now at how a team that is full of all of this talent, and I think there's some holes on this roster, no doubt about it, that needs fixing, but there's definitely plenty of talent to be able to win with this roster. And then you also look at your division rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who won against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with way less than they should have. Like, Mike Tomlin is able to get that team a lot more wins than they probably should ever have. And to me, like, I guess I am starting to question, like, this Browns team cannot put it together. And it feels like it's a combination of a lot of different things. And it's frustrating to not be able to pinpoint it on one thing.
Yeah, I totally get the frustration. Like, I'm there with you. It is frustrating. I did not enjoy watching that game twice. It's not fun to operate that way. And part of that frustration, I have no doubt, is this idea that fans are sold on the notion of trading for Deshaun Watson meant that the rest of the team was ready. And when he came back, Jacoby Brissett was going to be limited. But when Deshaun Watson finally got on the field, everything's going to be great. I think there is some of this that is frustration at getting Deshaun Watson, frustration at Deshaun Watson for being suspended for the games that he is.
Yep.
And then you add in all these other things that it feels like you were sort of sold a bill of goods. Now, I would still maintain that the Browns would be 5-1 with Deshaun Watson, which obviously would change a whole lot of things. That doesn't mean the defense would still not be nice.
We could have been 5-1 with Jacoby Brissett. We got in our own way.
Yes, which is I think more of a frustrating element to this than anything is the amount of things that the Browns do that have nothing to do with the opponent. And that was consistently apparent against the Patriots, but obviously has been in those other games where the Browns lose by a combined 6 points, all of which they could have won. And you can use the word should, but didn't. So, like, you look at this game and you go, because this is some of the stuff you mentioned you covered this really well as far as like Nick Chubb. Why didn't it work? The Patriots kicked the Browns' ass on first down consistently. Like, there was nowhere to go. His longest run was 18 yards, hit 56 on the day. So he was getting 3 and a little bit yards per carry. But the Browns were consistently finding themselves in like 2nd and 12, 2nd and 10, like these situations where in previous years, people would be pissed off that they ran the ball on those down and distances. And here they're going, well, they should run the ball. In reality, what they're mad at is the fact that you get to the end of the box score and you go, oh, 12 carries. Well, why is this? But those situations sort of dictate what you're at. If you're at 3rd and long, in a normal situation where you're sitting there going, hey, Chubb can pick up the yardage and we're going to move the ball. That's where a lot of those carries come from. And the Patriots, to your point, did exactly what defenses have been trying to do to the Browns the whole year, which is force Jacoby Brissett to beat you. And he couldn't. And in that, combined with what the Patriots is, the Browns offensive line did not play well relative to their standard. I don't think anyone's going to argue that in the Browns locker room. Losing Wyatt Teller for the part of the game that he was out did not help. Like, I like Yelty Froholt, but I don't like him next to Ethan Posick, because Ethan Posick is, I won't say being carried by, but he certainly gets a lot of help by being flanked by 2 all-pro guards. that sort of help covers him up a little bit, and suddenly losing one of the guards makes it a big problem. I had the same concern coming in with Nick Harris. It wasn't Nick Harris I was worried about getting hurt. It was the guards, because it would suddenly, put him in a position to be exposed. So you get into these long down and distance things. The bigger problem is that there were countless opportunities for Jacoby Brissett to complete passes that would have been big plays. They left multiple touchdowns on the field in this game. To your point,
right.
It was winnable. Like it felt like the Browns got killed, and ultimately they did. But there were any number of opportunities, whether it was the David Njoku pass that just not a good ball that he catches, but he's tackled short. They end up settling for a field goal. Or the second play of the game where Jacoby Brissett's late.
He underthrows him. I mean, he misses Anthony Schwartz wide open. I mean, there were plenty of opportunities to still be had.
Or people complaining about Kevin Stefanski's play calling when Jacoby Brissett chucks a ball deep into coverage and he's got two wide open guys crossing that would have picked up not only the first down, but a ton of yardage. Like, that's not the play he's calling. It's the decision the quarterback's making. And I don't want to beat up Jacoby Brissett. I really don't, because I like Jacoby Brissett a lot. Like, I really like the person he is. I don't like the results, but I like even in defeat, him sort of rallying the troops and giving a speech to the team. Like, he's just, and we say this over and over, he's really endearing. Like, I really like Jacoby Brissett. Yes. I want him to be a part of this team when Deshaun Watson's in. So it's like, it's frustrating, like it was when he threw the interception against the Chargers, but I don't want to sit here and beat him up, because he's exactly who we thought he would be for the most part. Right. He's overachieved relative to what we thought he was going to do. And then he's sort of becoming the player that, he's been throughout his career. That's, you can only beat him up so much without getting into a situation where you're just like, you're asking him to do things he can't do. The other part that's frustrating is Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and David Njoku are all really freaking good. And like, they're all really playing well. And you're sitting here going, we have been dying for this for years, for all the years where they had, the years where they had Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, and David Njoku. They had Odell Beckham, or they had Corey Coleman, Josh Gordon, and Jarvis Landry for 20 minutes together, and David Njoku. And all of a sudden it's finally working, and you have Jacoby Brissett throwing the ball. It's like, it's a ridiculously irritating shell game of like, you have all these pieces together and like, there's always something in the way, but like, those guys continue to play well. And like, it's really encouraging. And as you mentioned, Anthony Schwartz was wide open. And like, there's all these things where, I want to plead with people and go, look, I don't like him off the field. I don't like him as a human being, but God damn, Deshaun Watson is really good. And he would make all this stuff like work better. And teams aren't going to sit and cover one with single high safety over the top against him. They're going to have to play too high. They're going to have to pull more DBs back. And suddenly Nick Chubb's could be like, holy shit, this is pretty good. I'm going to have a lot more running lanes to do. And like, that's tough. So you look at that and you're sitting there going, man, this, it's not fun. And I get it. Like, losing like that sucks when you're sitting there going, well, if we had this guy who is suspended for the NFL labeling him as a predator like that makes it really tough to swallow. And you sit there and go, why do we have to be like this to just try to win some football games? So I totally get it. And that's just the offensive side of the ball. Yeah.
Listen, Pete, I think it's going to continue to be a struggle for us for the next, how many more games until Deshaun was back? Are we
6?
Oh,
we are halfway. We are halfway.
Okay. And we have 2 really big divisional games coming up, which, as much as we want to say that this season is pretty much entirely over, it's really not. I mean, anything can happen. You have to beat the Ravens and the Bengals. And right now, from what we've seen and the performance that was trotted out on Sunday, like, I just don't know if this team has it in them, to be quite frank. I mean, one would hope that we see some fire in them, but the fact that we're playing at Baltimore, I don't know, Pete. This team just doesn't seem to have fire in them.
No, I mean, like, I get weird. I get weird about when people go, oh, they've quit, because I don't see that. But like, there are also times where like, it's easy to go, well, they're not giving a whole lot of effort because they aren't tackling guys. Like, that's just, this is basic stuff. But you look at the Ravens and the Bengals, and you said, you're sitting here as a Browns fan going, God, my team sucks. And then you look at the Ravens and the Bengals, you go, they aren't very good either.
Right. I know.
So like, and I'm starting to think my suspicion is that the Browns are going to be a better road team than a home team for the foreseeable future.
Which is wild.
Well, it's a dynamic that is unfortunate, but makes all the sense in the world for all the reasons we just talked about. Why a fan base would be anxious, would be worried about the other shoe dropping, that would be sort of exasperated with this team that they're sitting there being asked to wait again. It creates, I don't want to say negative, but just this weird, unpleasant environment at home. Whereas on the road, they're expected to be that team. And it's like, we're going in with this mentality of, we're not expected to be supported and all this other stuff. And at the same time, you're not getting booed by your own fans. You're getting, so I do think there's a little bit of like a mental thing that sort of benefits in that. And that's not to say that fans are wrong or bad. Like, don't mistake that, because the Browns made the choices that they made that would make a rational person go, why should I cheer for this? Now, my question is, why are you going? But at the same time, like, right. I totally understand being apprehensive at home. So I'm curious to see in this Baltimore team that's very flawed, even though they have a ton of talent, and their team that you said went there, both the Bengals and the Ravens, you're like, I don't know, man, this is going to be rough. Like these are teams with Super Bowl aspirations. You're sitting here at week 6 going, are we sure they're good? And I don't know the answer. But like, we look at the defense we saw with the Browns against the Patriots, and I've come to the conclusion the Browns can stop one thing or the other. They can either stop the pass or they can stop the run. You do not get both. And that's, part of that is the personnel issues they have. And I don't want to, get into that too much. We've talked about the defensive line issues that they have with defensive tackle are bad. That was exasperated by not having Myles Garrett. And then you're down Jadeveon Clowney, and your edges are just really bad when those guys aren't in. You've got young players or guys who aren't really NFL players like TikTok.
Favorite.
So it creates a bad situation. So what do you have to do? Well, if you're going to stop the run, you've got to commit more of your personnel forward to try to focus on run gaps. So the Browns did that. They stopped the run at a really high level, save for one really bad play that resulted in a 31-yard touchdown. But overall, they were good playing the run this week. Unfortunately, on the back end, they were terrible in pass coverage. And like, you look at this game and you go, a lot of this is man coverage, which people have been like clamoring for, and they just got beat. And, I wrote about this earlier this week, and I look at the 3 guys where I see as the barometer of this defense right now, which are Grant Delpit, JOK, and Greg Newsome. The 3 guys who most of us thought coming into the season, man, these guys are going to be really good in year 2. Look how they played at the end of last year, or year 3 in Grant Delpit's case. These guys were really good last year. JOK was a phenomenal rookie. Greg Newsome really tied that secondary together, and Grant Delpit played phenomenally well down the stretch, that the second half of the season when they moved him back to strong safety. All 3 of those guys are playing not good football right now. And like, I think some of that is, you look at these guys and I don't think they're playing with any confidence. Your second year player, I think I look back at Baker Mayfield's rookie year to his second year, and you go, oh man, the league's a lot harder than it looked like it was going to be. And it can be really rattling for those guys. And all of a sudden you go, I don't know if I can do this. I don't have that vast experience to rely on where I go, I know I've got this. I'm seeing bad technique out of Greg Newsome. He's playing super high in certain cases and getting beat by some routes that just shouldn't bother him. My question there is, for people who don't think I criticize coaching, did the Browns do him a disservice by asking him to play in the slot? I don't know if that's the answer, but I do question if we have now overloaded him as a second-year player, asking him to move inside, outside. And in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting he can't do that. I think he can do both, but it's still a lot on a second-year player. JOK, again, the defensive line doesn't help, but his eye discipline is terrible. His eyes are in the wrong place too often. He's having to play side to side, which isn't good, but he's not tackling well. Grant Delpit, same thing. Eye discipline is a really big problem for him. And you're just, getting really bad play out of these three guys. For people who want to fire coaches, that could be the answer. I'm not going to say empirically that the Browns have the perfect coaching staff on defense. What I would argue is that is Kevin Stefanski's call to make, and the mob shouldn't have anything to do with that, especially people who argue with me and go and say, well, Joe Woods needs to be fired because of weird reasons that don't have it. Just basically the defense isn't playing well. And then I ask why, and they go, I don't know, but Joe Woods has been here for 3 years and this is working. That's not a really good dialogue to help me see what you're talking about. And again, a lot of this is unknowable. What is going on behind the scenes? What are they being taught? What is being coached? And unfortunately, some of that isn't about Joe Woods, other than sort of communicating to his position coaches what he expects and what he wants them to do. Ultimately, it's on those guys. So do we drop a level? Regardless, the product overall is going to be on Joe Woods, and above him, Kevin Stefanski. They are going to be responsible for the product on the field of the defense. But is it as simple as firing Joe Woods? Hell no. Because Joe Woods being fired isn't going to make Tommy Togiai get his ass kicked any less, or Jordan Elliott get blown off the ball any less, or Perion Winfrey look completely, unplayable as a run defender. It's not going to make these guys tackle better. Those are things that are just player mistakes or trusting, technique that they've been learning forever. Greg Newsome, part of the reason he was so good coming out of Northwest, he was phenomenal in just doing the things he was coached to do. And he's not doing that as much as he was. And again, I attribute that to confidence, which is a tricky business to get into. What I do think is at some point you have to listen to the players. And the players keep saying on a weekly basis, it's not coaching, it's on us. Now, they could be saying that and to the public and going, we don't want to be seen as guys who threw people under the bus. However, when the Browns played the New England Patriots last year, what did Myles Garrett do? He came out and said, I didn't think we adjusted correctly, this, that, and the other thing. And a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, Myles Garrett, because they didn't like Joe Woods. I was a little bit, I don't know. But they did get behind closed doors, and it sort of led to a getting behind the scenes and figuring some things out. And the Browns played better last year. The other thing I would point to and look at last year is when the Browns had Malik McDowell on this team. Or not McDowell, Malik Jackson. And Malik Jackson on multiple occasions throughout the season said in public that he didn't believe young guys were taking this seriously enough. And then Myles Garrett sort of echoed a little bit of that. And then he had that one speech where he challenged all those guys, and then they responded really well. I don't know if they're missing guys like a Malik Jackson, and you're getting guys who just aren't taking it seriously, and that maybe Myles Garrett's car wreck has sort of taken him out of that mindset, and he's worried about not having as much credibility because of that and having lost time. I don't know the answer to that. All I'm saying is, as we've been talking about, and the whole frustrating thing is there's not one answer. There's all these moving parts you look at and go, what's the problem? And like the rest of us, they may be looking and going, well, shit, Deshaun Watson is 6 more games away. What the hell are we doing out here? We don't feel like we're ready to go. Would they have more juice if Deshaun Watson's out there? I suspect maybe a little. And then you get down to the bottom line. Who wants to be a professional football player? You have to sort of answer your own question and bring your own juice to some extent. You have to be willing to get there. There are a lot of criticisms that get thrown at coaching that, one, having done it, it's really hard to just be like, oh, the coach is failing because A, B, and C are happening. When you take all the responsibility off players who are ultimately going to be the ones playing on the field. Joe Woods is not going to make one tackle this year. That's a tough, right? It's tough, and that's ultimately part of the business.
Yeah, I think it begs the question too. I don't think there's any question, or maybe there are questions. People don't like Kevin Stefanski and whatever. But I would say, I don't think there's any doubt that he is very talented when it comes to scheming up an offense and being a really good offensive mind, right? I think we've seen enough throughout his time here that he is a pretty good play caller. He gets guys open. We have not seen him with the quarterback that he prefers, right? Because it's been Baker Mayfield, it's been Jacoby Brissett. I think we'll get an even better evaluation of how this offense will be once Deshaun comes back. Now, that being said, he is the head coach. He is over the defense. Now, Joe Woods obviously is the defensive coordinator. he is getting a lot of criticism, rightfully so. But Pete, like being a coach and kind of having an idea of how it the staff operates, like does he need to spend more time on the defensive side of the ball, or is that something that he is 100% kind of giving up to Joe Woods? Now, he never throws Joe Woods under the bus. Like he does a pretty good job of like, I am the head coach, like it's my responsibility. But at the end of the day, like how much is he involved with the defense? Is this team like not buying into the scheme that they're running? Like, I'm not going to try to throw out conspiracy theories here, but like, are they is their play reflective of like them just not believing in the system, or is it part of the reason, or partly that they don't have the talent to fit the scheme? Are they too young? I don't know. Like, I'm just like very confused by all of this.
All right. So let's take this in reverse order. The scheme. Scheme wise, the only thing that really like stands out is, other than just having a belief in speed and a belief in having more safeties on the field, it's whatever you use it to do. Ultimately, I mean, their defensive line plays super wide, which is going to be super useful against Lamar Jackson because it's all designed to sort of contain him, limit how much he can get outside, both as a runner and as a passer. That is the goal of that part of the defense. And other than that, speed being more designed to take away the pass than the run, even though that doesn't make the run unimportant. It's just, you are looking at a league, and particularly conference and division, where you're sitting there going, we have to beat Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and whatever the Steelers are throwing out that week. And ultimately, you're not sitting there going, well, we've got to stop J.K. Dobbins, Joe Mixon, and Najee Harris. It's a quarterback-driven league. That doesn't mean quarterback-driven does not mean passing. Quarterback-driven means quarterback. Lamar Jackson has 451 rushing yards right now, which is almost half of what the Ravens have. He has fewer passing yards per game than Jacoby Brissett does right now, which is unbelievable to me. But that's just you have to defeat the quarterback, not passing. Right. So they've built this defense with a mind of taking away these quarterbacks who can create with their legs. And when it's right, it's been really good. This season, what I have watched is a team who has played zone. I've watched a team that has played man and sucked at both. What I've watched is a team that blitzes a lot and gets nothing for it, and a team that's dropped a lot of guys back and tried to play more conservatively. I've seen them play press. I've seen them play off, which off is more conducive to being a help as a run defense, whereas press is more conducive to pass defense, assuming you have the guys to do it. All of these things have happened over the course of the season. The Browns played a ton of man against the Patriots and the Falcons, and they got beat doing both, because it's become like, if you're trying to make a quarterback work hard, there's nothing easier for them to read than man coverage. It's because they know exactly where the guys are going to be. They don't have to think about anything. It's just, is he open or isn't he? The other things, the zone drops and some combination coverages where you have some man and zone, all these other things. That's where you can get guys to make mistakes, where people are like, well, just play man. Okay. Bailey Zappi is a super experienced quarterback coming out of college, even though he's a rookie. He's played a ton of football. Throwing man coverage at him is not going to do anything, but that's sort of where you're left, because you've committed 8 in the box and you have whatever's left behind to try to play some, to play coverage. You can't really play zone when you don't have numbers. It's really tough to do. To the other part of that, to the Kevin Stefanski part, he's super involved in defense. He may not be running the meetings, but he's in the meetings. He's in all the meetings. In any meeting he might not be in, he's watching as a recording of the meeting. People talk about this notion like, that the head coach can't be at all these things. Listen, we figured this out at high school, that the defensive, the head coach can be at whatever meeting he wants to be. He figures out the schedule and makes it like, that stuff is insane to me. The Browns have way more resources, and they have all day as opposed to like 2 hours, or 3 hours that a high school team does. He can be wherever he wants. And ultimately, at the end of the day, end of the week, he is signing off on what Joe Woods is doing, because it's his ass. He's not stupid. Like, just like in your job or anyone's job, if you are a person who is over people, you are responsible for what they are giving you, and you're co-signing. You are saying, this is good enough. This is like acceptable. This is representative of me, or what I'm doing as a business. That's no different in this. So the thing you have to take away with Stefanski is whether or not he likes Joe Woods as a coach. He likes what they're doing scheme wise. He wants to be aggressive. He has said he wants to be a team focused on takeaways. Obviously, the Browns aren't getting very many of those, but like these are all things he signed up for. So in a world where Kevin Stefanski parts way with Joe Woods, and let's be honest, he may have already decided that he's going to do that, but also isn't going to sit here and go, why would I fire a guy and make our staff have to work that much harder? Like at the very least, they are all working. Like fewer people makes the job harder. That maybe he's sitting there looking at his staff going, it's not good enough. I'm going to have to do that and get somebody else who's going to run a scheme that I want, or play with a mindset and an attitude I want, regardless of what the scheme looks like, and then goes out and gets that guy. I don't assume he's made that decision. I think he's more likely to be a wait till after the season and reflect on it, like, you know, a rational human being more so. But it's possible he's seen enough and said, you know, we're moving on. But that's the stuff where it's sort of like people complain, well, maybe he's too nice and too loyal. Here's the thing. Mike Tomlin has 2 Super Bowl rings, and he's crushed all the time for being too loyal to, like right now, Pittsburgh Steelers fans hate Matt Canada. If you are anything near Matt Canada, or you see it on Twitter, you see blame Canada memes constantly, GIFs, whatever, anything related to South Park on that, because they don't like Matt Canada. At no point have I ever heard, and this came out today, is Mike Tomlin, or in this case, Kevin Stefanski, too nice. This is a complaint from somebody who's covered this team since the 80s. Like, that's, again, it comes down to, this is nonsense. Like, he knows way more about this than you. And if ultimately it proves to be too loyal, it's going to be his ass that gets fired for it. But like, I always sit back here and I've seen criticism of Andrew Berry that's come out in the last, like today, that John Dorsey was somehow better than Andrew Berry, which makes me want to freaking just disappear forever. Like the way I look at this, and no one likes it. Let these guys do it. Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, let them do it. They've been really, really good. And I understand the results are not what you want them to be, but whether it's getting players, finding players that fit, you need to look no further than Amari Cooper this year for a 5th round pick. Like, people are going, well, what is Andrew Berry done to improve this team? Are you serious? A 5th round pick to bring in Amari Cooper, who's been the best receiver since Josh Gordon for this team? And you're going, what has he done to help this team? They have a really good set of receivers. They just are waiting for the quarterback that they traded 6 draft picks and $230 million for to come into it. So, like, again, I get it, the frustration, but like, you have to sort of look at this as a rational individual and resist the urge to be so frustrated that you get drawn into what amount to be like bad conspiracy theories as to how like the operation works and all these other things that like just don't make sense when you take 30 seconds to really think about what that would mean.
No, and I get it. I just like, my fear is that we were not hoodwinked into thinking that this team was only one position away from being Super Bowl contenders, and that being the quarterback. Now, I know that's the most important position on the field, on the team specifically. But right now, the product that is being put on the field feels like we are more than just a quarterback away from being really good.
Well, they are. I mean, and it starts defensive tackle. They are not good enough there. And ultimately, I think they're going to do more to address the edge position. I would not be surprised to see Jadeveon Clowney come back, because he's clearly shown he's willing to take less money to play with Deshaun Watson. That was his whole thing.
See, he's the one that worries me. Like, he clearly signed this 1-year contract because he wanted to play with Deshaun Watson. But like, I don't know, is he motivated to play right now, Pete? Like, just based on the product that's being put on the field. Like, part of me is questioning, like, is he actually, like, could he actually play if he wanted to, or is this a choice that he's making because this team right now sucks?
I will not go to he's not playing because he doesn't feel like it, but he's on his 4th team, and it's not by accident. He has worn out welcomes at multiple places, and he's a guy who's been reputed to be not a good locker room guy, which even when that choice was made, and I was sitting here devil's advocate, and unfortunately the injury sort of decided it, but like, I was in the keep Olivier Vernon. I was in that camp because Olivier Vernon was a guy who was a really good locker room guy, in addition to being a good defensive end. I understood that Jadeveon Clowney was sort of like a better scheme fit for what the Browns wanted to do. They wanted that bigger, stouter end who could control the line of scrimmage. But Olivier Vernon was a really good run defender who was also a technician as a pass rusher. But like Olivier Vernon was a guy who like spent time working with Jedrick Wills just to try to like help him understand what he was going to see in the league. Like I do always question, it's not, and this is another buzzword we'll get into, analytics. But I've always questioned with any football team, how much of an emphasis has been put on that part of it. Like, I always talk about, and this is sort of my whole thing on, being pro getting people with good character, is because you are only as good as your people. And when they are unreliable or
you're setting a precedence for everyone else,
unavailable because of stuff they do, or just who they are, it makes the whole thing more difficult. So I think Jadeveon Clowney has warranted criticism for how he's carried himself in the past. I thought last year he was better about it in terms of being more engaged and being more effort. He played through a whole lot of pain last year, and had a great season. I don't assume that he's not playing because he's hurt, but he is not he's not that leader you want at that position. Like Myles Garrett has to own all of that. And the fact that you've been without both of those guys or have a compromised version of those has really been problematic. Like if you were trying to like peg things that go wrong, obviously losing either one of those for the season would have been disastrous, but you got two meaningful injuries. Myles Garrett's car wreck was really bad for this team,
right?
For all the reasons that a car wreck would be bad, but certainly the injury part of it, and then losing Jadeveon Clowney, all of a sudden your defensive line is, two bad defensive tackles flanked by Alex Wright and Isaac Rochelle. And like, these are barely professional football players. So they are players away from that. Now, whether it's fixing, we've talked about them deferring money and what they're really waiting for. I would expect the Browns are going to sign a whole pile of veteran defensive linemen, or at least continue to invest in that position, because with Deshaun Watson in tow, whether people like him or not, they're going to say to themselves, he's good for my bottom line. And the NFL is a finite world where the average career is 3 years. And if I'm making along with that, I'm doing pretty good. I'm willing to sign there to play for him for my personal gain. So whereas last year, this past offseason, you look at it and go, I don't know if I want to sign with that. This whole, I don't know how long he's going to be suspended for. This mess with Baker Mayfield, and you said to go, if you're a guy like Akeem Hicks, I'll go sign with the Bucs. They've been really good. Maybe they're primed to go Super Bowl. They don't look like they are, but for a 1-year deal, it sort of made sense. Next year, is it him? Is it more guys like that where you can get guys that can reinforce, and all of a sudden you have a bunch of veterans up front that this front looks really good. And then you have JOK who's protected, and you have, whether it's Deion Jones or Anthony Walker coming back. It was interesting that Deion Jones' contract, they removed 2023 from it entirely. That's a really smart move in terms of making the agent happy and making the player happy. They knew the $12 million was never going to happen anyway. Now he gets to be a free agent. So there's a little bit of doing right by the player there. I think it's going to help them, but he still becomes an option for them to address that position along with Walker. Both of those guys will be free agents. They'll have, potentially competing against each other, but those elements come back. I think it will benefit the whole line. The pass rush being so bad, it's Myles Garrett or nothing right now, is obviously hurting that young secondary. And as bad as the secondary is playing, and it is, those are all factors that are causing problems with it. So there's a whole lot of, all of it comes down to shared responsibility. Everybody owns this season. That's coaches and the organization. And the organization made choices, which I agree with in terms of their thought process. 2022 was not going to make sense to invest a bunch of money in. It sucks that it's like this unpleasant, but it always made more sense to load up for when they were really making a real run in 2023 and through 2026.
Is very unpleasant.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that 1-31 sucked. It was not fun, but was it worth it? Yeah, probably. It was probably worth it. You get all these players that you're happy with now. You don't really think about it anymore. You're just sort of focused on what you have now. But unfortunately, enduring this game, these games and the losses they are, one of the things I was hoping to see was the growth and development, not only of players, but coaches. And one of the things we talked about last week was, how does Kevin Stefanski get these guys to respond coming out? Now, to his credit, they played the run better, but they also had a ton of breakdowns in the defensive backfield.
Yep.
The offense had a number of opportunities. The offensive line didn't play well, and they couldn't capitalize on the wide open passing game. So I look at that overall and I go, that is largely a miss. I was hoping we'd get more than that. This week now, playing against the Ravens and then hosting the Bengals, these are two more opportunities for Kevin Stefanski to rally the troops. And as daunting as it looks to play the Ravens, the Browns have played the division pretty well recently.
Right.
And Joe Woods has played, been pretty good against the division recently. Like last year, 4 interceptions on Lamar Jackson the first game. They only scored 16 points in that game. And then the second one, Lamar Jackson gets hurt and they win in no small part. The defense carried them in both those games. Joe Woods' premier game was against the Cincinnati Bengals. Like the game where you sit there and go, this is the best Joe Woods has ever been, Cincinnati Bengals, when they absolutely drubbed Joe Burrow and company in that game. Obviously, they won this year against the Steelers. They lost both last year, but most of that was because the offense was just so impotent. Like that is where I'm curious to see how they respond. I'm curious if that helps these guys play with a little more confidence. It's a very familiar opponent. Yes, there are some differences, but ultimately it's the Ravens. You know what you're sort of getting. You know what you're getting from the Bengals. Can Joe Woods get a better performance out of defense? Can Kevin Stefanski get a more inspired performance out of the offense? Because this becomes just like the Steelers game. If the Browns go in and beat the Baltimore Ravens, everybody's going to be all is good in the world for 5 minutes. And then we're back to complaining about various things. But, in the same way that if they lose, it's just going to be, it's going to be a snowball effect. You've lost 4 games in a row.
Division game. Yes.
And now you're 1-1 in the division. So it's all an opportunity. And obviously, some of this is what Kevin Stefanski is going to say. But if there's a world where they're suddenly 4-4 in a couple of weeks and they're 3-0 in the division, it's still not where they should be. That you're still going to sit there and go, man, September, what a misfire, what a waste of what could have been. But at the same time, you're at least being able to look at this team and go, okay, I get it. They're not what what we thought they would be this year in certain respects, but at least they are working to improve. And it sucks because it feels like I'm selling this to people, and I don't want it to feel like that. But you just sort of have to look at what this team really is right now and try to see where they get. But from here, like for the people there are people I cannot help that are just going to be mad about this season in that respect, and are just going to, people who are just, whether it's the Deshaun Watson trade and being furious at them, and what am I going to do? Like, I get it. Like, I've had any number of conversations with people who are like, I can't do this. And I'm like, I get it. I'm not here to argue with you, but there are some, I swear to God, people in their Twitter profile, I hate the Browns now, who are still yelling at me about the Browns, and what all the things they're doing wrong. So there are people I cannot help or reason with if you don't like the word help, but in terms of what you're trying to get at this season. So you're looking at this season and you say, look, we're 6 games in. Yes, they can get better, but are they likely to make, a radical change over the course of the year? It's super unlikely. They are largely who they're going to be. They can certainly play better. They can make some improvements. Like if Jadeveon Clowney is healthy this week and Myles Garrett is healthy, his shoulder came back positively in terms of the x-ray he took after the last sack he got. It changes the dynamic a little bit. If you don't have Jadeveon Clowney, it's going to be a problem because that's a big part of your defense. Denzel Ward coming back would be really nice. What are we going to get from Deion Jones? This seemingly is a matchup that Deion Jones should perform well in. These are all things where you sit there and go, okay, but if they lose, then we're back to
the same conversations.
Yeah. So and I appreciate this. You're asking me questions that are, I know you want to know, but are also sort of for everyone. But, I don't want to be in this position where I'm trying to sell this team to you. But I do think, regardless of what you think of Joe Woods, because it doesn't really matter to what I think or what anyone thinks. It's entirely Kevin Stefanski's call. I don't want to be in a situation where the mob gets what they want. I don't
Right.
want to be in a situation where ownership dictates that Kevin Stefanski has to operate a certain way, because these are the telltale signs of a dysfunctional franchise.
Well, and I think that's a legitimate fear though, because I do feel like this ownership has history of butting in, making decisions, not being satisfied, and then throwing all of these changes. So like to me, like that is like my concern is like, I don't think Jimmy Haslam and Dee Haslam are the type of owners to kind of like ignore the noise. I don't think they like being booed. I don't think they like being at their own stadium and being booed. Like, I don't think they like this. So like, how much patience do the Haslams have? I guess is the other question.
Yeah,
you know?
it's a fair one. Now, I would like to think that Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta and Kevin Stefanski all, and this is part of having an organization that is like legitimately on the same page, is being able to say, look, we've made this huge trade that we wanted to make happen. Thank you for allowing us to do that. Now you sort of have to accept like what we're doing this year and why it's good for us to do it, even though it may not be fun, and how much better this gets next year. Jimmy Haslam has sort of been accused of being sort of the engineer behind the trade. That's not really realistic, but however you want to feel about Jimmy Haslam, he took the time to really investigate and sort of get sold on this and ultimately buy in. So could he ultimately just, get angry and decide, screw it, I'm not doing any of this? Sure. I do think he has to have some awareness of how toxic this job looks if he does that. And just in general, Deshaun Watson is a toxic element. Ultimately, it may go away, but at least for the moment, I cannot emphasize how awkward and unpleasant a hiring cycle would be next year with everything that's going on to Deshaun Watson, including a trial that is still, pending. Like,
yeah,
it's not over. I mean, like people, and obviously the recent lawsuit, I don't know if that's going to go anywhere or not. It doesn't affect his suspension, but the previous lawsuit is still there. And we're going to get to a point where after the season, everybody's going to sort of be like, what do you mean we're not done yet? He served his 11-game suspension. I'm ready to move on. And there's going to be this other trial, which is going to continue to be a thing that brings negative headlines on him, on the Browns. It's going to continue to be ugly. People are still going to be disgusted. And, do you then want to try to hire? Because that is literally the time that this would be going on, where, you get into February and March. I think it's March that technically he can like go to trial. Are you really, is a potential prospective head coach going to be like who's probably hired in, the hiring cycle is getting a little bit later than it has. It moved back a little bit. That's around the exact time that would be going on potentially. It's just awkward. It's just not what you want to do. But yeah, I'm at I get it. It's awful, but let these two guys, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta, if you want to throw him in there, do it. That's not anyone else. They don't have to take anyone else. They can do what they want to do, but let them be the ones to do it.
Pete, I have a very unpleasant Sunday scheduled ahead of me that I feel like I must share because I don't know if it's actually worse or better than watching the Browns. So I have a colonoscopy scheduled on Monday, which means I cannot eat a single thing on Sunday. And I'm going to be doing my preparation for said procedure on Monday, which means that I'm going to be spending most of my Sunday on the toilet, on the shitter, or watching the Browns play like shit. So like, I don't know, like I was texting my friend group chat and I was like, I don't actually know what's worse at this point. Like, is it my Sunday or the Browns Sunday? So I'm hoping that they don't ruin my Sunday already more than what it's being ruined right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the Browns play poorly, it will be like we're all watching the video the next day of your appointment, I guess, on some level. Yeah, that's no,
very, very upsetting how this all came to fruition on a Sunday. I did not plan for this appropriately, I guess.
On the plus side, if you win, you can sort of high five your your doctor as he's trying to like investigate what's going on. So yeah, like that's the thing is like, that's what I really want. Like, I want to see growth and development for Kevin Stefanski, talent, whatever it is, whatever the issues they're having. That's what I really want to see. And I think because of what this team is and the problems they have and the fact that they aren't ready to contend like we would have wanted, where is Kevin Stefanski being as a coach for 2023, like through the end of the season? And hopefully we're not stupid and just like decide we have to fire this guy. Because I'd like to think that all of this experience, even the stuff where I'm looking at this past week and going, man, I really would have liked a more inspired effort. I'm hoping this is all stuff where he can learn from and be a better coach when it does matter. We shall see, but yeah, best of luck with the colonoscopy. Hopefully everything's as it should be. But yes, the preparation for that sounds awful.
I'll be locked in the basement, miserable. So if everyone wants to talk to me on Twitter and keep me coming, just know what I'm going through. Okay. I will not be in a good headspace.
Well, I suppose, on the plus side, you're going to be like, Cavs. Yay. I mean,
Cavs. Yay. Yeah. You know what? The only way to heal a heartbreak, Pete, is to move on to the next one. So onward with the Cavs. I'm ready.
So, I mean, maybe that's the other part. And I would love, nothing would be greater than I think part of this is like the frustration of the NFL is because it's week to week. You have so much time to sort of broil in whatever happened, loss, win, whatever. And I'm hoping like, the Cavs with all the people they've got going for them, that it can take a little bit of that heat off and you can just be like, okay, the Browns lost. I'm not happy about it. I didn't enjoy the game, or they won and I enjoyed the game. And I'm now going to go and enjoy this other team in the meantime. And then I'll be back to see you guys next Sunday, like that type of thing.
Exactly.
But we shall see. Anyway, thanks for all who keep listening and like, share, subscribe. We're getting some reviews that are very helpful. Some of you have been good about finding us on YouTube, which we appreciate. But yeah, we'll be back next week, hopefully with more to celebrate after the first of two division games. But regardless, we will be here. Some of us with a hopefully a good health report with them. Anyway, we'll be back.